Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
All right, we got the thumbs up, 2 fingers. That means we're ready to go. Welcome to the MuseCast. That's Dan Kent. Hi, Dan. I'm Shawna Boren, and we are back and ready to talk about our next portion of scripture passages from the Sermon on the Mount. We've graduated to Matthew 6. We're chugging along so well, Dan. I want to ask you a quick question, though. Prior to, and I think I know the answer, but prior to this series and you doing all the prep and research that you do for this series, how often would you circle around to reading the Sermon on the Mount and just your daily devotional time?
Yeah. Well, in terms of daily devotional, I don't know, but I do. I come back to the Sermon on the Mount a lot. And one of the things, I think of it as the heart of what Jesus is about. So I do actually come back to this quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I've read a lot of books about some of the teachings in here. So it is something that I come to a lot. How about you?
Well, first, let me say, ding, ding. I knew that you did and you would. So yay, partner. I'm getting to know you so much. Yeah, no, I feel like this is just a great, now, no, not in daily devotionals, but pretty regularly. I kind of use it as a check, to see kind of how I'm doing with things. Am I really looking more like Jesus, or am I still kind of wallowing in the things that I make excuses for? I'm not like a guilt thing, but it's a good little just a check-in that I do with myself. There was a pastor who once said to me, no one could ever live up to Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Yeah. So either don't try or just know that that's a bullseye to try to journey towards. So I'm glad that we're diving into it. I think it's going to be great. So Greg kicked us off. Now the title of the series starts with a G.
Yeah, what is it? What is the title? It's hold on.
We are so prepared.
Yeah, well, I've been thinking about the sermon itself, and I sort of forgot about. Well, and that's the thing is we don't have the.
I can find it.
We don't have
Getting Real.
Getting Real, that's what it is. Yeah,
Real.
You were right about the G though. That's true.
I was right about the G.
I was like gourd, grape. So
you're thinking food and Thanksgiving around the corner.
That's right. We're close.
We're so close. We'll talk about that next week. What we like to nibble on during that time. Okay, but Getting Real is the series. These are the passages that we're addressing within the Sermon on the Mount. We're in chapter 6, and Greg kicked us off with what's your story? I was about to say what's your backstory, but no, what's your story?
What's your story?
What's your story? What's your story? All right, Dan, tell us what's your story about what's your story?
Yeah, so Greg talked about, so first of all, let me just say that, this chapter, Jesus talks about a few of these spiritual practices involved, like managing your resources, like giving to the needy, praying, fasting, and he kind of jumps into those. He has a common sort of analysis of each one where he talks about, don't do these things in front of others. And so we're going to look at each of those, in a lot more detail over the coming weeks. But to kind of set the stage, Greg talked about disciplines in general and how do you get motivated to do these things? Because they're called disciplines because they require discipline, and they require discipline because we don't want to do it. And so how do you get yourself to do things that you don't want to do? And a very important component of that is the story that you're living in. And so he gave an example out of his own life where he talked about his own athleticism and the breakdown of his otherwise Olympic athletic body.
Yes, wrestler body. I believe he said he has the body of a wrestler.
Right. That's right. Yeah. And so he talked about how he used to run these ultra marathons, I can empathize. I used to train to run a marathon, but I got just so bored at like 11 miles. And I'm like, I don't want to do this. It's too boring. It's like aggressively boring, if that makes any sense. And so I couldn't even make a regular marathon, but this guy would run like these 50, 70, 100-kilometer runs. And he used to do that. And so he kind of talked about how what would drive him are like the story that he was living in. And it turns out the story wasn't true, but he kind of thought that if he took really, extreme kind of physical fitness as like a top priority, that he would create like physical health longevity in his life. And so it was worth it to him to endure these things that he did not want to do. Now, it turns out that story wasn't true. His body still kind of broke down, and there were other variables that he didn't think of. So he applies this, though, to what we're talking about, and he says that we need to live our Christian lives within the right story. And he talks about 1 Corinthians 9, where the Apostle Paul uses an athlete as an analogy for how we should be disciples, that we should train, we should take seriously this pursuit of Christ-likeness in the same way that an athlete takes seriously whatever sport or skill they're trying to develop. But in order to do that, you need to have that right story. And so Greg kind of looks at 1 John 3, 1-3, and there is so much in this verse that, we could spend a lot of time in there, but if I can summarize it, and I don't know if I can, because there's just too many good things in here, but I'll try.
Okay.
The Apostle Paul says that, he says, look at what a God it is, what a God we have that calls us children, and that we are children, and the world doesn't know us because the world doesn't know him, but we are God's children. And even though we are God's children, that's not the whole story. What we're going to be hasn't even been revealed to us yet. Because we are God's children, he has big plans for us, and so we do know whatever that's going to be like, it's going to be like God, and we will see him as he is. And if you hope in this, if you really hope that you are children of God, and if you are children of God, he has big plans for you, then you should purify yourself now. That is, you should pursue these disciplines now. And I just think that's such a beautiful verse. And then Greg kind of takes away from that. He notices, though, that Paul doesn't say, since you are children of God already, you're all done. Paul doesn't say that. Yeah. You're good. No, he says, no, if you believe this, and if you have your hope in this, which you should, then you should work all the more harder to purify yourselves. And then Greg talks about how, and I love this phrase, by the way. And when he said this on Saturday during rehearsal, I was just like, yeah, ding. I wish I had a bell. I should get a bell for these types of things. But he says, if you don't live within a big story that justifies the sacrifices you're making, well, then you're just living by rules. And living by rules that with no story is just rules without fuel. It's a rule without fuel. And so I think what the Apostle Paul gives us is this fuel, and we should live into that fuel. And ultimately, I think how Greg summarizes his sermon is he says the disciplines, and I think he's right about this, and this is what I'm going to look at during my message in this series, is that the point of these disciplines is to take back what Satan has stolen from us. And that has to do with our autonomy, I think. And because God does not want us to be automatons, but Satan does. Yeah. And I think what happens in this world is we become automatons to the wrong kingdom. And the disciplines are one of the ways that pry us out of that kind of dependency and that automation, I guess you could say. So a great sermon. And I love this series, and I'm super excited for it.
Yeah, I think it was a great, he set the table really well as to what's to come. And so I too really latched on to rule without fuel because I think, as with any topic that we bring up in the church, people come to the discussion with some preconceived ideas. And so when you say spiritual disciplines, I know that people can have very positive feelings about that, or they can have very negative feelings, or just even some indifferent feelings. I feel like many people, at least those that I've conversed with and interacted with and engaged with, have encountered the spiritual disciplines as rules. Like, you must do these things to prove that you're a follower. Yeah. And I love that we are looking at this and saying, no, let's reframe, let's have a paradigm shift, because rules, just for the sake of rules, are rules without fuel. We are actually saying these are practices by which we get to know our King, we get to know our Lord, our Savior, in more beautiful, intimate ways. And so I really love that. I don't want people to replay any old tapes they may have of, gosh, I got it. Now I've got to wake up extra early to do this. And I've got to set aside, 5 days a week to fast. And I've got, the got tos. No, my hope is that people will say, oh, no. This isn't about got tos. This is about being fueled by love of God, being fueled by gratitude for what Jesus has done for us. And so therefore we do these things because we love him, and it'll draw us closer to him. It reminds me of, you and I were just talking about the fact that I got to visit my son up north this past weekend. And that's about a 2.5 hour drive. But I'm happy. First of all, it's beautiful, like driving up north, so no complaints. Yeah. However, driving up and driving back. And then it just so happens that it was family weekend up at his university. And then this weekend is his fall break. So I'm driving up again to get him and driving back, and then we'll drive back up to drop him and drive back. And so I don't do that begrudgingly. Like, I do it because I love my kid and I want to see him and be with him and spend time with him. And that's a sacrifice of time, a little bit of energy, and that I'm happy to make because of the results is I get to have time with my boys. So
that is a really good analogy.
Jesus, thank you. And with Jesus, it's all the more greater. So giving up certain wants to get a greater want is, right, I think, the way Greg put it.
Yeah.
What are some of your thoughts, or what are some of the things you've heard when the topic of spiritual disciplines has come up? Has it been met with excitement, or with more of what I was talking about, with like, it's a rule that we have to follow?
Yeah. I have heard a lot of different things. But first of all, just your analogy about going up to see your son, that's such a great analogy, because it's like, what do we have energy for? That's why we have energy, to spend it on things like that. And I think that's similar to some of the disciplines. And it's not like there's anything good. It's not like there's anything right about giving to the needy. Like, my contribution, that's the good thing. No, the good thing is that the needy now have something that they need, and that the resources are being distributed more fairly. And there's not like, oh, good for you, you prayed. No, good for you, you communed with God. That's what's good. Mm-hmm. Literally good for you is you had this commune with God. And it's not like, oh, look at how long he fasted. That's not the good thing. The good thing is the freedom from lust for food and all of that kind of stuff. And so I think what we'll find as we're going down here is that all of these, there's liberation in these disciplines, if you see the intention of the discipline, instead of looking at it as just like an activity of a religious people. No, it's a gift. Each one of these things are a gift. And really, this is how, and this is sort of answering your question via your analogy. But if you look at like the Sermon on the Mount within the big picture of Jesus's ministry, First John tells us that Jesus came, that is his whole reason for coming down and becoming human, was to conquer the works, or to overthrow the works of the devil. That's why he's here. That's why the whole thing happened, is so that he could overcome or destroy the works of the devil. Well, if that's his overall mission, and if the Sermon on the Mount is sort of his magnus opus, his ultimate sort of message, his ultimate teaching, well, I can't help but think that what he's teaching about here are things that will overthrow the devil, specifically overthrow the devil in our lives. And what I think is that as we get into this chapter 6 and we look at these disciplines, how I'm reading these is I'm looking to find out what is it that the devil does that this discipline overthrows? And I'm just sort of stealing the thunder for my sermon, which will be in a few weeks here. But so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And I just, to me, it's just really sort of brought the disciplines to life and really the Sermon on the Mount to life.
Yeah, I always, along that track, I circle back to John, I believe 10:10, right? The enemy, the thief comes to steal, kill, destroy, but I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And that's how I look at the disciplines, like a way in which we enter into this abundant life. Not that it's like a locked door and this is the key, but a way in which we are able to live out this abundant life and defeat the enemy is by leaning into these practices, not because, like you said, their rules are like disciplines, like in the negative sense, but because they are ways in which we lean into Jesus and he leans into us. And through that relationship, we overcome the things that the enemy so intently is trying to steal from our abundant life and kill from our abundant life. And so I think this is a great thing. Like you said, these are gifts. These are beautiful gifts that bring us closer to the face of Jesus. And so I am really thrilled to be digging into these. I want to give you a few moments because you've already kind of laid out a little bit about where you're going, but you know this whole series, Dan, because of your research and what you do. And so I just want to give you a few moments before we end to kind of give us a taste and tell us anything you want to tell us, anything that you're excited about beyond what you've already said. And I know I just cut you off. So whatever you were going to say, and then
I was basically going to say exactly what you set me up for. So it's just, that's the thing about us is we're on the same vibe, you know, it's just all the same.
We're there.
That's right. That's right. Well, I think for me, it excites me. You know, Greg talked about how the Reformation sort of had this very novel idea that, you know, when we die, God just perfects us, and that there's something neat about that, because then all the glory goes to God, is sort of the mantra that is said. However, the downside of that is it sort of sabotages one's motivation to really try, because what's the point?
Right.
I mean, when your story that you live in, going back to God, to Greg's point, when your story is that God does it for you, that's going to create characters in the story who don't do it for themselves. And so, but if you look at it in a different way and you say, no, God doesn't want to do this for you because God doesn't want automatons. Satan does. Satan is the one who wants automatons, not God. And so it's almost as if this teaching is the exact inverse. It's the teaching of the enemy. But rather, if you look at these teachings as gifts that will liberate us from the automation that the world and the principalities and powers create, well, now suddenly there's a motivation to throw myself into it. And it's the type of thing where, you know, we get, we swim in the ideologies and the teachings and just the ambiance of the principalities and powers of a fallen world. And it's the type of thing that works its way into us all the time. And it's always there. And so doing these disciplines, these were not meant to be a one-time thing. They were meant to be something that we do as part of our discipline, as something on a regular basis. And what's really amazing about that is that we're never, you know, while we're here, we there's always more progress that we can make on this. And I think that there's something in this teaching for everybody at every stage of life. And so, yeah, those are just a couple of the things that I'm excited for about this.
I think you have whetted our appetite really well, Dan. And I think that this is going to be a phenomenal series. And I'm excited because we get to hear from Greg as per usual. We get to hear from you, and that's going to be really cool. Woo, woo, woo. That'll be the highest rated, highest viewed sermon all year.
Yeah, I doubt that. I doubt that.
I'm pumping you up, Dan.
Yeah, the sermon on fasting, that's the one that's really going to rock the world, you know?
Yeah, just a few weeks before. Thanks.
I know.
We're going to talk about
I know. It's just, can you even?
Oh, wow. It'll come in handy at some point.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. No, it's going to be really great. And so I just encourage you all to continue to tune in and then engage with the message in a variety of ways. One way that we hope that you continue to do is to circle back here with us every Tuesday afternoon as we continue the conversation and just unpack what we're hearing, what we're thinking, what's landing, what we want to talk through a little bit, and just, continuing that conversation.
Yeah.
And send in questions. Don't forget to do that. We always love to interact with you guys in that way. And let's be praying that the message that God wants us to hear really does get out, and that we would see this as gifts, as Dan said, and we would see these as opportunities to continue to grow and become and learn more about Jesus, and not let the enemy have his say so any longer. Like, let's just take that away and swim in a different stream. That's right. All right, Dan, I'm excited. You ready? You ready to start prepping and preparing for?
I'm ready.
All right. Sounds good. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Wait a minute.
Whoa. What about the nugget? There's no nugget?
Okay. I was thinking to myself, are you ready? And then I thought, I'm not going to make Dan come up with a nugget because he's already said so many good things. But since you mentioned it.
Well, yeah, when you were kind of closing down, I assumed that you're going to ask. And so I did. I do have one thing I would like to share. And that is,
wait, you guys, I feel like, not that I'm your trainer, but I feel like finally Dan's ready with the nugget, which is always so good. So Dan, yay.
Thanks.
Awesome. Lay it on us.
Well, it's really not even mine, so I can't take credit. I just want to circle back to what Greg said, because I didn't include it in the summary, but I think it's so valuable. And he talked about imagining what you will look like when you as yourself are Christ-like. And I think that practice is so important. And I just want to share, in my work in mental health for 20 years, I worked with chronic depressives, chronic suicidal patients who they would come in every few months onto the psych unit, being suicidal and being chronically depressed. And they were referred to as just like frequent visitors. They were just, here they are again, they're back, and look who's back, and so on and so forth. And one of the things I started doing, like 2005, I started taking these chronic people who would keep coming in. Some of them would come in 30, 40 times a year, and they would be suicidal and depressed. And I remember I asked one of them, I'll just say her name is Sandra, let's say, just to pick a name. And I'd say, Sandra, you've come in quite a bit, and she's like, I know I've, major depression and so forth. And I'd say, well, what would you look like, Sandra? This is what I want you to do. I want you to sit down and think about, what would you look like if you weren't depressed? Like, what would Sandra's day be like from morning to night if you weren't depressed like this? What would that look like? And the first time I asked that, I was just absolutely surprised at how she did not have any answer whatsoever. Like, oh, I don't know. I've never thought of that. And that's just so amazing to me, because it's like, wow, you can't get to where you're going if you don't know what it looks like. And so you have to have that picture in your mind so that you can orient yourself toward that. And so after that, I started asking everybody, and I would say 99 times out of 100, they had no answer to what it would look like if they weren't depressed. And it's sad, because, in our culture, especially how we deal with mental illness, we tend to look at symptoms and symptom reduction instead of casting visions and orienting ourselves to a new picture of ourselves, stuff like that. Things that we do in anything else that we want to pursue. Like, if you want to be a ballerina, you need to know what it looks like to be a good ballerina. And so you strive towards that. You put posters on your wall of the athletes that you want to be like. But for some reason in our personal lives, we don't do that, or in our spiritual lives. And so I think that teaching that Greg had is just absolutely powerful. And it's something that should be not just a one-time thing, but a regular part of your spiritual journey.
That was good, Dan. Thank you. And we would have missed out on that nugget had you not spoken up. So thank you so much. You guys, make sure you circle back with us next week, because we're going to have a summary. We're going to have discussion. we're going to have a nugget without being reminded about it. It's going to be really good. We thank you guys. We hope you have a great week. Take care.